This book was my first biography, and I think it will be my last. Biographies are too hard to write. I'm actually a social and political historian masquerading as a biographer, and I've learned that my book belongs to a category. It's called the Life and Times category of biography. And in fact, when I began, I thought the Times would dominate, that the book would focus on the political and social culture of the Depression, of World War II, of the Cold War, and that the life would be mere illustration. That was not to be. All that history is in the book, but Dorothea Lange is the star of the story. With her forceful personality, she soon moved into the driver's seat and, in a certain sense, took charge, although I also spent a lot of time arguing with her back and forth over quite a number of years. Of course, she didn't write the book. A biography has always got to be one life seen through another life, in this case mine. Although I had written a great deal about gender, thinking about gender, this biography forced me to examine more closely how gender works in the life of an individual. And this lecture, for which I'm really grateful for a number of reasons, affords me a chance to look back and try to spell out what I was doing. And let me warn you or tell you that what I'm about to say is not in the book at all. This is kind of a meditation after the fact about the book. Now, thinking about this issue of gender was particularly complex because I was writing about an artist, and because an artist's work lives after her. And it was produced in one context, but it takes on new meanings in whatever context people then see it later. No matter how stringently we try to exclude contemporary meanings, they intrude. So in thinking about this, as well as in writing the book, I had to try to retain a kind of double awareness about the past, about the period in which Dorothea Lange lived, and also about the present. Now, I make these observations about gender against Lange's will. She was no feminist, and she did not want to have her work discussed in gendered categories. She wanted to be a great photographer. She did not want to be a great woman photographer. But historians should not necessarily try to please their subjects. So I'm doing it anyway. Let me start. There are several levels to what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the personal, I'm going to talk about the social and political, and then I'm going to talk about what's in the photographs as we see them today. But I'm going to start with the personal. She was a middle-class child of German immigrant parents. She was born in Hoboken in 1895. Very placid middle-class life until two traumas hit. When she was 7, she got polio. When she was 12, her parents separated. The physical experience of the polio was certainly painful and terrifying, and she emerged with a permanent, if small, disability. But she was deeply, deeply upset by her father's departure from the household. But the biggest blow, I think, were how these blows were assimilated and understood by the young Dorothea, and in this regard, her mother's influence was key. Her mother was embarrassed by Dorothea's disfigured foot and lower leg, and by her limp, and urged her always to try to disguise them as much as possible. In this way, even her polio experience was gendered because her mother had such anxiety about what her body would look like. When skirts got shorter, Dorothea Lange began to wear slacks, which was quite unusual and not at all fashionable at the time. She never again wore a skirt that was less than floor length. As an adult photographer, Lange made many, many, many images of feet and legs, and with her typical magic, could make photographs of just feet enormously expressive. Then her mother also presented the marital separation to her as a desertion, an abandonment by their father, although I learned that, in fact, it was actually more mutual and more ambiguous. I won't go into that story, that's in the book. But the point is that Dorothea felt abandoned because this is how her mother felt. She developed such a rage against her father that when she arrived at San Francisco in 1918, and where she was to spend the rest of her life. She adopted her mother's maiden name, which was Lange or Lange, and she never mentioned her father or his name to anyone, including her two husbands, her children, and her best friends. So Lange's experience of these childhood blows developed along with her gender identity, but that didn't make her response in any way determined or predictable. She was born with an assertive temperament. Another girl might have used similar experiences quite differently. From age 12, she developed the practice of wandering alone the streets of New York, first the Lower East Side, where she attended middle school, then the Upper West Side, where she attended high school, and ultimately the entire island of Manhattan. She may have had a limp, but she was extraordinarily strong. This walker in the city was also an autodidact, self-taught. She was a mediocre student in school. She did not attend university, but she discovered on her own the modernist art that was then blossoming in New York. She taught herself photography by taking jobs. Her first job was as a person in one of those chain of portrait studios where she made cold calls to people, trying to sell them portraits, and worked as a receptionist at various photography studios, and basically gained on her own these photographic skills. One of the people she worked for was a very, very noted photographer by the name of Arnold Genthe, also a German-American, and he thought she was very talented and gave her a cast-off camera. Excuse me, I should have shown that earlier, sorry. That's Dorothea and her younger brother. I figure, though it was given to me by a descendant, I figure she might be anywhere between 8 and 10 in that picture. She moved to San Francisco in 1918, and she soon opened a photography studio at an upscale location. Within 2 years, she had become the portrait photographer for San Francisco's wealthy art patrons. This high-velocity success derived, I think, from the conjunction of her charismatic personality and a kind of modernist visual sophistication. At first, she used, as you see here at the top picture, the romantic, misty, pictorialist style that dominated in the 1920s. But she soon began to modernize these pictorialist conventions. Incidentally, for those of you who know anything about San Francisco history, the man at the bottom is Mortimer Fleischacker, one of the most powerful men of his time in San Francisco. She attracted elite arty clients with a slightly bohemian elegance in her persona, in her studio's ambiance, and in her photographs. She never used the painted backgrounds that were common at the time. She never used props. She discouraged formal poses. She did not even ask her subjects to smile. She used dramatic shadows and unusual angles and created emotion and sometimes mystery by hiding part of her subject. In short, her success derived from her sensitivity to the class taste of the clients she wanted. Her work represented in many ways the acme of individualism in portraiture. She used what she'd learned to suggest, or as she would say, to reveal, individuality and a deep inner life. She endowed her subjects with interiority, so to use a new word. Her clients believed that she had the power to capture their essences. They felt that their education, their culture, and sensitivity just shone out from the images that she made. As she had begun to do in New York, in San Francisco, she integrated herself into a bohemian arts crowd and made her photography studio into a meeting place of artists and the more liberal wing of the city's wealthy arts patrons. By 1920, a year and a half after she arrived there, she married the city's most desirable bachelor artist, the painter Maynard Dixon. And Maynard Dixon was, throughout Dorothea Lange's life, much more famous than she is. He is what's called a Western painter, and he still has many, many fans. His pictures can sell for up to $1 million.